Valentina had just fallen asleep on my chest when my phone buzzed on the side table. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake her. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. I expected something bland and performative. Maybe a reminder about the formula or a link to some American parenting article she thought I should consider, but instead it was 6 words that split my world in two. We're moving to Seattle. I emptied the account. Good luck. I didn't move, not for a full minute. My body went numb before my brain caught up. I opened the banking app and stared at the balance on the shared family fund. $0 was ours. The same account we'd all contributed to Mom, Dad, and me for emergencies, shared care, Sophia's recovery. They took every cent, not a forwarding number, not even a postscript. My breath hitched shallow and tight. Valentina stirred her tiny fingers, curling near my collarbone. She was warm, trusting, and utterly unaware that 2 people she'd never remember had just made a decision that would shape her entire life. I pressed my lips to her forehead and whispered, "Thanks for the heads up." They hadn't even waited for the weekend to end. I was supposed to watch her while Sophia rested after her supposed breakdown in Chicago. No one said how long the arrangement was, or that it came with a disappearing act and financial sabotage, but then again, nothing with them ever came labeled clearly. I laid Valentina gently into the portable bassinet, her breath steady her cheeks, still pink with sleep. Then I stood and walked to the kitchen where I kept the paper files, the ones Mom always mocked me for printing. I pulled out the last bank statement. It had shown over $18,000 2 weeks ago. I tried calling them, of course, straight to voicemail. I texted Sophia, read no reply. My chest ached, not from panic, but from something heavier recognition. Of course they do this. Of course I was the one they'd leave holding the child, the debt, the silence. The fridge buzzed softly behind me as I leaned against the counter and looked around. Bottle's diapers, her pink sleep sack still warm in the laundry basket. Everything that belonged to someone else now, mine by default. By morning, I'd begin sorting out Valentina's schedule and look into legal guardianship. But for now, I just sat beside her and watched her sleep the enormity of it all pressing against my ribs because deep down, I already knew they weren't coming back. Not for her, and not for me. The thing is, I shouldn't have been surprised. Being the reliable one starts so quietly you don't even notice the leash forming. It's picking up Sophia from ballet because Mom is on a deadline, even though I had a club meeting. It's folding Dad's shirts because Sophia gets distracted, and then watching her distraction turn into reward. I used to think I was being helpful. That being dependable made me valuable, but dependable turned into invisible. Sophia was all fire and drama tears in parking lots. Poems left on napkins, a dozen half-finished majors before she settled on spiritual anthropology. People adored her because she was messy and luminous and impossible to hold accountable. My parents loved her like she was a rare crystal even when she shattered everything in sight. Me, I was the shelf. They called the family fund a shared net. Contributions from Mom's side, hustle Dad's lecture, stipends my freelance gigs. It started after Sophia's second hospital stay just in case someone else needed support. I remember that exact phrasing, someone else. Not Sophia. Not again. Someone else. But I was never someone else. I was the backup system. The first time Sophia drained the account, it was for a retreat in the Catskills. Transformative, she called it. The second time, it was a failed move to Los Angeles to write a memoir she never started. They told me I shouldn't be so rigid about money that Sophia was trying to become. Meanwhile, I patched gaps in my car insurance and skipped new glasses for 2 years. Now here we were. They'd left me with her daughter, emptied the account, and moved to Seattle like it was an overdue sabbatical. The silence after that text wasn't just cruelty. It was clarity. They'd never intended to come back. Not to help, not to answer, not even to check. I sat on the couch, the room dim around me. Valentina softly cooing in her sleep. I remembered the last time my mother had visited this apartment. She'd frowned at my chipped mug and said, "You still don't have matching dishes." She didn't comment on the handmade tiles I'd installed in the bathroom or the framed photos I'd restored for the Historical Society. Just the dishes. Of course she left without saying goodbye. That's who she always was. That's who they all were. I was the quiet daughter, the stable one. And stable people don't need warning. But Valentina would. She would need more than they ever gave. And I was the only one left to figure out how to give it. By day 4, my body had learned to function in 2-hour fragments. Valentina's sleep patterns were an unpredictable math problem. 3 naps of 40 minutes or 1 long cry from 2 to 4 in the morning. Her lungs were impressive. My nerves were sanded down. I worked in flashes, editing footnotes for a regional history journal while she napped on a folded towel beside my laptop. The client had emailed twice about the deadline. I lied and said the delay was due to a family emergency which felt absurdly mild. Every bottle was a negotiation. Every diaper a scramble. I bounced her until my arms ached, then rocked her with podcasts in my earbuds just to stay awake. There were moments, short ones, where she'd smile at me, gums showing, and it felt like oxygen. Then she'd scream again, and I'd feel like I was vanishing into the wallpaper. Friends sent check-ins, texts, a meme here or there. Nobody showed up. I called Sophia twice, left 1 voicemail. I even typed out a 3rd message asking her point blank when she was coming back. I didn't send it. What was the point on Thursday morning after a night of pacing the floor with Valentina strapped to my chest while she screamed into my collarbone? I opened the door to get the mail and found a small Tupperware on the stoop still warm. A note written in tiny cursive, "You're doing more than enough." Looked across the hall. Mrs. Carter's curtains twitched just slightly. She was retired, lived alone, read mystery novels with the windows open. We'd only spoken once before about trash pickup. Later that afternoon, she knocked once lightly and handed me a folded quilt. I made it for the wrong-sized bed. She said voice, even as if this were a business transaction. I thanked her. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't stay. It was the first time someone saw me in days. That night, I sat in the glow of the kitchen light holding Valentina with one hand and spooning reheated stew with the other. My arms were tired, my chest heavier than hunger could explain. But for the first time all week, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, I went looking for the old folder where my parents kept legal documents. I hadn't set foot in my parents' house since the day they left. It still smelled like lemonwood polish and overconfidence. I told myself I was just there to grab the last container of baby formula, or maybe find an old bassinet tucked in the attic. But I knew what I was really looking for. Answers or proof, Valentina dozed in the carrier, strapped to my chest as I moved through the kitchen opening drawers with slow fingers. The fridge was empty, except for a jar of imported fig jam and half a bottle of sparkling wine. The cabinets were clean, too sterile in that way. Only people who don't plan to return leave them. In the bottom drawer beneath the junk mail pile and broken corkscrew, I found a worn green folder labeled Seattle. Inside were printed travel itineraries going back 6 months. Flights, apartment lease, and Seattle International SIM cards already activated. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't emotional. It was orchestrated. Behind the itineraries was a notarized form. My name, my address, my signature copied from an old lease. I realized power of attorney for Emma, age 6 months, transferred to me indefinitely. I pressed my thumb to the paper, trying to understand the depth of it. They had made me her legal guardian without ever asking, without a conversation, without even pretending I had a choice. Tucked into the back of the folder was a printed bank statement. The family account dated 2 weeks before they vanished. A withdrawal, $21,600. Destination Meridian Trust, Private International Division. Not even a U.S. bank. They moved the money offshore. I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd once hosted faculty dinners, and corrected my posture and stared at the numbers. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to break something. But all I felt was stillness. This wasn't a mistake. It was a trade. They chose freedom, and they offered me Valentina as the excuse. A pan on the counter still had the price tag from a boutique in Portland. $240. They'd left that behind too. I folded the documents and placed them in my bag. Then I looked around the room one more time as if expecting to find their voices echoing off the walls. But it was quiet, and the quiet didn't apologize. Back home, I laid down, opened my laptop, and searched how to file for emergency guardianship in Virginia. I expected the legal aid office to be sterile and overworked. In some ways, it was. The waiting area buzzed with fluorescent lights, and the receptionist barely looked up from her keyboard. But when Michael Thompson stepped into the room, tie slightly crooked sleeves rolled, he greeted me like I was a person, not a case file. That alone nearly broke me. I showed him the documents I'd found. The power of attorney, the bank statement, the printed itineraries. He read through them, slowly tapping the pages once before he spoke. They didn't notify you, he asked? No, they just left. He nodded, jaw tight. Then this isn't just a guardianship transfer. It's potential financial abandonment. Maybe even fraud, depending on how the funds were classified. He explained that while the power of attorney was technically legal, the deception around it wasn't. If we could show they intended to offload responsibility without consent or knowingly misused shared funds, we had ground to challenge both the custody arrangement and the money trail. I asked what the process looked like. He said it would be slow, tedious uphill. I said I'd already been up all night for weeks. What's one more climb? That afternoon, I began cataloging everything. Receipts, screenshots, Sophia's old texts asking me to help out for the weekend, and my mom's message about the money. I compiled a spreadsheet. I printed copies and labeled them. It felt obsessive, but also like I was building something one page at a time. 2 days later, Sophia finally called. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted her voice on the record. Emily, she said, her tone clipped. You agreed to this. No, I didn't. You said you'd help for a weekend. Not indefinitely. There was silence on the line and then a laugh. Dry, condescending. You always dramatize everything. I hit record on my second phone. You think they abandoned you, grow up. They're done carrying you. I nearly dropped the phone. I steadied my voice. They weren't carrying me. They were hiding behind me. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. It's done. You're not going to scare us with legal threats. I didn't say anything. I let the quiet fill the space. She hung up. I labeled the recording and backed it up twice. That night, Valentina had a mild fever. I held her against my chest, her breath hot and uneven, and watched the ceiling pulse with the streetlight outside. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel vindicated, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The next morning, I called Michael and told him I had something he needed to hear. The message came on a Sunday morning just as I was warming a bottle. We're flying back. We want to see. No apology, no explanation, just a declaration like they were returning to claim a suitcase they'd forgotten. I didn't reply. 3 days later, they showed up at my door. Margaret in her expensive scarf. James, tall with sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. They looked tan and rested the kind of rested only people without responsibilities ever managed to be. I opened the door just wide enough to let their intentions hit the threshold and stop there. You look tired, Margaret said, brushing past me. Still working that part-time job. James followed, arms crossed, eyes already scanning the apartment. We were surprised you didn't reach out sooner. Thought you'd have questions. But I guess not everyone's cut out for parenting. I didn't answer. I let them talk. Margaret walked to Valentina, who was seated in her high chair, gumming a piece of banana. She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. Her posture's off. You really should be doing tummy time more consistently. I turned to face them fully. I filed for full custody 3 weeks ago. They froze. And I submitted documentation of the bank transfers, the forged power of attorney, and your failure to notify me of intent to leave the country. I also have recorded calls with Sophia, confirming I never agreed to long-term guardianship. James's jaw shifted. Emily, there's no need to escalate. Margaret took a step forward. Let's not make this ugly. It's already ugly, I said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Margaret's expression hardened her eyes sharp with the kind of cold calculation I'd grown up watching. James sighed, performing disappointment like it was a rehearsed monologue. I think it's best we leave, he muttered. I nodded and opened the door. Margaret turned back as she walked out. You've always had a flair for melodrama. I just didn't think you'd drag a baby into it. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I closed the door gently, turned the lock, and exhaled. Valentina dropped her banana on the floor and clapped her hands. That afternoon, Michael called to confirm our court date had been moved up. The courtroom smelled like dust and wood polish, and everything felt too bright. Michael walked with quiet certainty, holding our binder like it was gospel. I sat beside him, hands folded, watching the judge's eyes more than my parents'. Margaret and James arrived 10 minutes late. Sophia never showed. Michael began with the timeline. He presented the notarized documents, the travel plans dated months in advance, the account statements showing the funds drained and transferred offshore. Then he brought out the recordings, Sophia's voice dismissive and cold, confirming I had never agreed to guardianship. He handed the judge a printed transcript. Margaret cleared her throat a few times. James smirked now and then. They didn't deny the evidence. They tried to reframe it. My daughter is prone to exaggeration, Margaret said smoothly. She's under a lot of stress. Caring for a child, especially one that isn't hers, is bound to bring up emotion. The judge didn't blink. I've reviewed the documentation. She set her voice level. What concerns me is not just the abandonment, but the strategic nature of the transfer. Ms. Quinn was misled and left without support, both financially and emotionally. She paused, looked directly at my parents. I'm granting full legal custody to Ms. Quinn. The offshore account will be frozen pending review. Any visitation from Margaret or James Quinn must be supervised and approved in advance. Margaret opened her mouth. The judge raised a hand. We're done here. Outside, the wind had picked up. Margaret stopped me by the courthouse steps. You were always jealous of Sophia, she said, voice low and sharp. Even as a child, you just waited for a way to punish us for loving her more. I looked at her but said nothing. She turned heels, clicking James following behind without a word. I walked to the parking lot where Valentina was waiting with Mrs. Carter, who'd come without being asked. The baby giggled when she saw me, arms outstretched. That night, as I rocked her to sleep, I realized I hadn't felt relief, just an odd, hollow stillness, like the end of a very long echo. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a message from Michael marked urgent. The kiln hums quietly now, steady and warm. I keep it running low most mornings while Valentina plays on the quilted mat a few feet away. The cradle I built from old pine slats sits near the shelf of finished bowls. She naps there sometimes, fingers curled around a fabric doll Mrs. Carter stitched by hand. My hands are back in clay. The wheel spins again. I open the studio 2 days a week. 3 when Valentina's feeling settled. Orders are slow but steady. The local cafe restocked their mug shelf with my pieces last month. And a college student wants a custom set for her thesis exhibit. I take what I can and I let the rest go. Mrs. Carter comes by every Friday with oatmeal cookies wrapped in wax paper. She never stays long, just to check in and a soft squeeze of my arm before she disappears down the sidewalk. Her presence is its own kind of healing quiet, dependable, the opposite of what I was raised to expect from adults. Sometimes I still wake up expecting a new message, some fresh twist in the saga, but it's been months and the silence has settled into something I can live with. The legal follow-ups are mostly done. The account is still frozen. There's no word from Sophia. I've stopped waiting. Last week, Valentina took her first steps between the work table and the door. She fell after the third one, then laughed like it was a game. I laughed too, and then cried alone in the kitchen after she went to sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was the one who saw it. I wrote Sophia a letter yesterday, not out of obligation, just to close a loop. I didn't say much. Valentina is safe, I wrote. That's all that matters. I didn't include a return address. This morning, as I opened the studio and set my fingers into the damp clay, I looked at the small cradle beside me. The tiny bowl Valentina had dented with her thumbprint, the faint streaks of flour on the floor from yesterday's toddler baking attempt. I was left behind so they could escape. But I stayed and built something better. Valentina learns the weight of reliability can become a leash binding her to others' chaos while her own needs fade. Her parents' abandonment and Sophia's irresponsibility reveal that dependability, once a source of pride, made her invisible, exploited by those she trusted. Through caring for Valentina and confronting betrayal, she discovers resilience in reclaiming her agency. By pursuing legal guardianship and documenting evidence, she transforms from a passive supporter to an active protector, building a stable life for Valentina. The lesson is clear: true strength lies in recognizing one's worth and refusing to be defined by others' neglect.
I sat at my desk just outside Marcus Stewart's office, fingers hovering above the keyboard, still reeling from what had just happened. After 8 years at Stewart and Palmer Consulting, 8 years of holding this place together, of knowing every client, every contract, every last detail, I'd finally asked for the promotion I'd more than earned. And Marcus laughed. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 35 years old, and according to the man who runs this firm, I'm just a secretary. What Marcus doesn't know, what none of them know, is that for the past 3 years, I've been quietly building something of my own. And today, everything changes. I checked the time, 9:47 a.m. 13 minutes until a conference call, not one for Stewart and Palmer, but for Chen Consulting, my consulting firm. I stood, smoothed my charcoal pencil skirt, and walked to the break room. No one looked up. No one ever did. I was part of the background, the one who made coffee, ran meetings, kept things from falling apart. The break room was empty. I pulled out my personal laptop, the one I never let anyone here see, and connected to my mobile hotspot. As the call loaded, Marcus's words echoed in my head. A promotion? He'd scoffed, glancing up from his golf magazine. To what exactly? Account management, I said, my voice calm even as my heart raced. I already handle most of the client communication, and I have an MBA from. An online MBA, he cut in. Which you earned while working as a secretary. Sarah, you're great at what you do, the coffee, the scheduling, the neatness. But account management? That's a different caliber, you understand. The laptop chimed. I clicked to accept the video call, and James Wilson appeared, CEO of Wilson Manufacturing, one of the Pacific Northwest's largest industrial equipment companies. Sarah, he said, smiling. I reviewed your proposal. Very impressive. Your approach to supply chain optimization is exactly what we need. I smiled back, this time with full confidence. Thank you, James. Based on our projections, we can cut operational costs by at least 22% within the first year. Call me James, and yes, we agree. The board approved the contract this morning. We'd like to move forward with Chen Consulting as our primary logistics partner. My chest tightened. My first 7-figure contract. That's fantastic news, James. I'll send the finalized documents this afternoon. When the call ended, I leaned back, letting the reality sink in. Chen Consulting, my so-called side project, had just closed a $1.2 million deal. The company I built during stolen hours and sleepless nights was about to become a force. My phone buzzed. Marcus wanted his coffee. I shut my laptop, slid it into my bag, and headed to the office kitchen. His usual, double-shot Americano, extra hot, 1 sugar. As I stepped into his office, I heard his voice through the door. No, Bill, you'll love this. My secretary, Sarah, asked for a promotion today. To account management. Can you believe it? I set the coffee on his desk without a word. He didn't look up. The rest of the day crawled. I scheduled meetings, prepped documents, kept the wheels turning. At 5:30, I began my nightly routine, prepping for the next day. Marcus finally emerged at 6:15, briefcase in hand. Sarah, I need the Wilson Manufacturing proposal polished for tomorrow's meeting. Big potential client. Make sure it's perfect. I kept my expression neutral. It's in your inbox. I sent it this morning with the market analysis and revenue projections. Good. Be in early. Meeting's at 9. I'll need you to set up the presentation. Of course, I said. Though you should know, Wilson Manufacturing has already. Great, thanks, he said, already turning for the elevator. I watched him go, then turned back to my computer and drafted an email to my attorney. It was time for phase 2. That night, in my home office, I reviewed the final contract from Wilson Manufacturing. My signature, Sarah Chen, CEO, felt bold and overdue. 3 years of hustle, and this was just the beginning. With the Wilson deal locked, I updated our timeline. Now I could approach the other companies I'd been courting, firms that had hesitated to sign with a small player. But now I wasn't small anymore. A message pinged on my phone. David, my younger brother and Chen Consulting's lead software developer. Did they sign? I grinned and replied, yes. 3 dots, then, holy shit, sis, we're really doing this. We really were. David had believed from day one, quitting his tech job to help me build the platform that set us apart. He saw what I saw, that legacy firms like Stewart and Palmer were dinosaurs, blind to the future. I worked until almost midnight. Then I set my alarm for 5 a.m., the start of another double shift. Chen Consulting before dawn, Stewart and Palmer by day. But only for 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks until everything changed. The next morning, I arrived early, 8:15 sharp, to prep for the Wilson meeting. I arranged the conference room just how Marcus liked it. Water pitchers spaced evenly, handouts neatly stacked, thermostat at 72. At 8:45, Marcus breezed in. He didn't even glance at the setup. By 9, the other execs had filed in. John Palmer, Victoria Hayes, the senior account team. Marcus took his place at the head of the table, proposal in hand. They waited. At 9:10, still no sign of Wilson Manufacturing. Marcus poked his head out. Sarah, are they late? Any calls? I pulled up my inbox. They emailed yesterday. They've decided to go in a different direction. He blinked. Why wasn't I told? I tried to let you know last night, but you'd already left. His jaw clenched. Get them on the phone. Now. I dialed, put the call on speaker. A receptionist picked up. Wilson Manufacturing. How may I help you? Hi, this is Sarah from Stewart and Palmer. May I speak with Mr. Wilson regarding our proposal? A pause. Oh, Sarah. Mr. Wilson is currently meeting with Chen Consulting to review implementation timelines. Would you like to leave a message? I glanced at Marcus. His face was turning crimson. No message. Thank you. I ended the call. Marcus stared at me. Chen Consulting. Who the hell is that? And why are they meeting with our client? I met his gaze calmly. They're a new firm, focused on integrated tech solutions and supply chain efficiency. Very forward-thinking, from what I hear. He straightened his tie. I want a full report on them. End of day. Of course, I said. He turned and stormed back into the conference room. I watched through the glass as the meeting fell apart. Executives packed up their folders. Victoria lingered, arguing quietly with Marcus. I opened my browser and typed in the homepage featured our platform, our services, our client results. At the bottom, a single photo of me in a sharp blue blazer. Marcus wouldn't scroll that far. He never did. The atmosphere at Stewart and Palmer shifted overnight. Tension pulsed through the hallways like a live wire. Behind Marcus Stewart's closed office door, voices rose and fell, sharp, panicked, accusatory. I didn't need to hear every word to know the topic. Wilson Manufacturing. The one that got away. I kept to my rhythm, scheduling meetings, managing calendars, ensuring everything in the office ticked like clockwork. But underneath the routine, something had changed. Every time my phone buzzed with a new notification from my Chen Consulting email, I felt it, a spark, a reminder that I was building something beyond these walls. On Thursday morning, Marcus summoned me. His desk, usually pristine, was buried under stacks of documents. His tie was loose, his eyes bleary. Not a good sign. Sarah, he said, what have you found on Chen Consulting? I opened my notepad, flipping to a page I prepared in anticipation. They're a relatively new firm, focused on integrated tech solutions for operations and supply chains. Their proprietary platform is getting attention for its efficiency metrics and AI-based forecasting. Yes, he waved impatiently. But who are they? Who's running the show? They keep a low profile, I said evenly. Their leadership team isn't prominently listed. They let results speak for themselves. He leaned back with a sigh, rubbing his temples. Wilson was supposed to be our crown jewel this quarter. Now the board's breathing down my neck. Did you see this coming? Any red flags? I kept my face neutral. Mr. Wilson emphasized innovation in our conversations. Their operations lead specifically mentioned wanting to overhaul legacy systems. And you didn't escalate that to me. I included those notes in my meeting summaries, I said gently. 3 months ago. They're in the shared drive. He didn't respond. We both knew he'd never read them. Fine, he muttered. Keep digging. I want more on Chen Consulting. And get me coffee. As I turned to leave, my phone vibrated, an email from Precision Technologies. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss a potential partnership. By the time I delivered Marcus's coffee, he was barking into the phone. I don't care how you do it. Find out who runs Chen Consulting. They didn't just steal Wilson. They're coming after everything. That night, I stayed late. Not unusual, but what I was working on was. I opened my personal laptop and composed a message. To all staff. From Sarah Chen. Subject. Opportunities at Chen Consulting. Dear team, Chen Consulting is expanding, and I believe some of you might be interested in the journey we're building. We specialize in blending traditional consulting with modern tech, and we're looking for like-minded professionals ready to help shape the future of the industry. If you're curious or interested in learning more, I welcome you to reach out directly. Warm regards, Sarah Chen, CEO, Chen Consulting. I hovered for only a second before hitting send. It was a risk, but the time for waiting was over. I knew who was quietly disillusioned. I knew who was ready for more. By the next morning, Marcus was already in the office, unheard of. His shirt was wrinkled, his jaw tense. Sarah, he barked. In my office. Now. I walked in, notepad in hand. Yes, Mr. Stewart. Johnson Electronics. They've just informed us they're reviewing consulting options, and guess who reached out to them? Chen Consulting. What the hell is happening? Would you like me to arrange a meeting with their team? Yes, now, and get John and Victoria in here. We need to stop this hemorrhage. As I turned, he added, and Sarah, I want everything you can dig up on Chen's CEO. There has to be a weakness. Of course, I said. Back at my desk, my inbox was already filling, responses to last night's email. Analysts, it leads, even senior staff. One after another, they expressed curiosity, interest, hope. At lunch, the whispers were louder. Phones buzzed, glances exchanged, conversations cut short as I passed. Marcus paced the hallway like a man watching his empire sink. A message lit up my screen. David. 3 more S&P apps just came in. Words spreading fast. I allowed myself a quiet smile. Everything was falling into place. 3 years of quiet hustle, of doing more than my job title, of building something that mattered. It was all coming to fruition. At 3:45, Victoria Hayes approached my desk. She looked around, then leaned in. I got an interesting email last night, she said. About Chen Consulting. I looked up. Oh? You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I met her gaze evenly. Victoria had always been sharp. One of the few who noticed the details I tucked into meeting notes. One of the few who listened. What would you like to know? I asked quietly. She studied me for a long beat, then smiled. We should grab coffee. Off the record. As she walked away, Marcus burst out of his office. Sarah, why hasn't Johnson Electronics returned our calls? I followed up. Their assistant said they're no longer interested in a meeting. They've already signed with Chen Consulting. He slammed his palm on my desk, making my pens rattle. This is absurd. How is this company stealing our clients? What aren't you telling me? I met his eyes, voice calm. I'm just a secretary, Mr. Stewart. What could I possibly know? Something flickered in his expression. Realization. Doubt? Maybe both. He turned abruptly and stormed back into his office, slamming the door. Through the glass, I watched him pace, thumb pressed to his ear. Desperate. But he wouldn't find anything, just what David and I had allowed to be found. We were too careful, too strategic. My phone buzzed again. Another email. This one from Amy, Marcus's own assistant. She'd only been here 3 months, but that was long enough to endure his temper. Long enough to start looking for a way out. I replied with the same message I'd sent the others. A discreet invitation to meet at Chen Consulting HQ the next evening. One by one, the pieces were moving into place. Marcus Stewart was about to learn what a secretary could really do. The next morning, the Stewart and Palmer office simmered with tension, like a powder keg just waiting for the match. The fallout from the Johnson Electronics revelation had left everyone on edge. I arrived at my usual early hour to find 3 senior partners already cloistered in the conference room, their conversation low, urgent, and intense. My phone buzzed with a message from David. Conference room is ready for tonight. 28 S&P employees confirmed. I smiled as I read it. 28. 4 senior consultants, 6 IT specialists, 3 from the analytics team. All ready to walk away from Stewart and Palmer. All ready to help build something better at Chen Consulting. At 8:45, Marcus stormed in, looking like he hadn't slept, hair uncombed, tie askew. He didn't say a word as he made a beeline for his office, already dialing before he even closed the door. Through the glass, I watched him gesture wildly as he barked into the phone. At 9:30, a calendar alert popped up on my screen. Emergency all-hands meeting, 10:00 a.m. Mandatory attendance. I watched as the staff filed silently into the large conference room, their faces tight with uncertainty. Victoria passed by, meeting my eyes and offering a subtle, knowing nod. We'd had our off-the-record coffee the night before. She'd gotten straight to the point. "You're the CEO of Chen Consulting, aren't you?" When I didn't deny it, she'd smiled. "I should have figured. You've been running Stewart and Palmer for years, just without the title or the paycheck." Now Marcus stood at the front of the room, trying to project control, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've had some setbacks," he began. "Yes, we've lost a few clients. Yes, Chen Consulting has been aggressive. But Stewart and Palmer has been an industry leader for 2 decades. We are not going anywhere." From my place near the back, I saw the skeptical glances exchange around the room. Everyone knew the truth. In consulting, perception is power. And our grip was slipping. "We're making changes," he continued. "Extended hours. More aggressive outreach. Everyone will need to step up. No weak links." Amy, his assistant, sat next to me, clutching her notepad like a lifeline. She'd already RSVP'd for tonight's meeting. After the all-hands, Marcus summoned me to his office. "Clear my schedule for the next 2 days. I need to focus on damage control." He ran a hand through his hair again, now fully vertical. "And get me everything you can on Chen Consulting's leadership. There's something we're missing." I nodded, already. But I didn't go home. Instead, I crossed time to Chen Consulting's real office, a sleek, converted warehouse buzzing with energy. David greeted me in the lobby. "You ready?" he asked, grinning. I adjusted my blazer. "Let's show them what we've built." Inside, the conference room was packed. 28 Stewart and Palmer employees sat in neat rows, faces full of anticipation. Victoria occupied the front row, entirely unsurprised when I stepped up to the podium. "Thank you for being here," I began. "I'm Sarah Chen, CEO of Chen Consulting. Some of you know me as Marcus Stewart's secretary. Others know me as the person who's been quietly managing client accounts and writing proposals behind the scenes." I clicked to the first slide. "What you might not know is that for the past 3 years, I've been building a new kind of firm. One that merges traditional consulting expertise with modern, agile technology. A place where talent is recognized, regardless of title." I shared our vision, our client portfolio, our proprietary software platform, our profit-sharing structure. Every slide, every word was met with growing enthusiasm. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Victoria stood and began to clap. One by one, the others joined her until the room rang with applause. The chew and I ran late. By the time the room cleared, it was nearly 10 p.m. Victoria stayed behind. "Just so you know," she said with a smirk, "Marcus opened that email about Chen Consulting's leadership before I left the office. He was staring at his screen like he'd seen a ghost." I smiled. "Tomorrow should be fun." Marcus was waiting at my desk the next morning. "You," he said, barely restraining his anger. "It was you this whole time." I set down my bag. "Good morning, Mr. Stewart. Coffee?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "You're the CEO of Chen Consulting. You've been stealing our clients, our people." "I haven't stolen anything," I said, voice calm. "Our clients chose us. Our employees chose us because they want to be valued. The same way I wanted to be valued when I asked for that promotion you promised and forgot." He paled. "But you were just a secretary?" I finished. "Yes." The secretary who ran your meetings, prepped your reports, managed your accounts, and held this firm together while you took credit and long lunches. I watched the weight of it hit him. He slumped slightly, the fight draining from his frame. The board meeting's in an hour, he muttered. They're going to want answers. They will, I said. But I won't be there to help you prepare. I picked up my bag. I quit, effective immediately. I turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Marcus, I left 8 years' worth of documentation on your desk. You might want to start reading, though honestly, it's probably too late. 3 months later, I sat in my corner office at Chen Consulting, sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows as I reviewed our quarterly reports. The numbers exceeded every projection. Since my departure from Stewart and Palmer, we hadn't just captured their top clients, we'd attracted their best people. Victoria Hayes now served as our Chief Strategy Officer. With her expertise and vast network, we'd expanded into new markets ahead of schedule. The former Stewart and Palmer employees who joined us were thriving, finally empowered to contribute at their full potential, no longer constrained by outdated hierarchies or invisible ceilings. My phone buzzed. A message from David. Turn on channel 8. Now. I reached for the remote and flicked on the wall-mounted screen just in time to see Marcus Stewart at a press conference. His once pristine appearance had unraveled, creased suit, weary eyes, shoulders slumped under the weight of everything he lost. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Stewart and Palmer Consulting. The board has appointed an interim leadership team to oversee the transition. I muted the TV as Victoria stepped into my office, her expression unreadable but the gleam in her eyes unmistakable. Caught the broadcast? She asked. I nodded, setting the remote down. How bad was it? She sank into the chair across from me, legs crossed, her voice calm. Worse than I expected. Your documentation from that day, it left no room for denial. Every strategy, every proposal, every client initiative, they traced it all back to you. When the board asked Marcus to explain why he denied your promotion, he couldn't even come up with a lie. I took a sip of my coffee, brewed exactly the way I liked it. A small luxury, but one that felt symbolic. And the clients? I asked. Victoria smiled. Once Wilson Manufacturing and Johnson Electronics pulled out, it was a chain reaction. Everyone realized they hadn't been working with Stewart and Palmer. They'd been working with you. The board couldn't spin that. My phone buzzed again. Marcus just resigned. Stocks down 30% since opening. David. I set it down and turned toward the skyline. The city glittered with possibility. This was never about revenge. It had always been about building something better. A place where hard work was recognized. Where talent didn't hide behind titles. Victoria cleared her throat. There's one more thing. John Palmer called this morning. He wants to meet. My brow lifted. About? A possible merger. Stewart and Palmer is hemorrhaging clients, morale, and market share. They need a lifeline. And you're it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the irony wash over me. The former secretary now had the power to determine the future of the company that once dismissed her. Schedule the meeting, I said. But make it clear, this isn't a merger. It's an acquisition, and it happens on our terms. Victoria stood, a flicker of amusement on her lips. Naturally. Oh, and your old office, still empty. Marcus never did find anyone who could actually do your job. Once she left, I opened my laptop and pulled up our long-term projections. Our growth was solid, sustainable, and grounded in a philosophy that prioritized innovation and people over politics. A final message lit up my screen. Thank you, Sarah, for showing us what's possible when someone believes in your potential. Amy. I smiled. Just a few months ago, I was only a secretary in their eyes. Now, I was leading one of the fastest-growing firms in the industry and reshaping the game as we played it. Later that afternoon, I gathered our leadership team in the main conference room, a bright, open space filled with the hum of purpose. Around the table sat individuals chosen not for their resumes alone, but for their passion, resilience, and vision. Stewart and Palmer has proposed a merger, I announced. But we're turning it into an acquisition. Not for revenge, but because we've built something better. A company where skill and integrity matter more than titles. Victoria gave a quiet nod. From secretary to CEO to industry leader. Not bad for someone they tried to keep invisible. I looked around the room at the future we were shaping together and felt a quiet surge of pride. We're not just changing one company, I said. We're changing an entire industry, and we're only getting started. That evening, I drove past the Stewart and Palmer building. Its glass facade reflected the fading light, the logo still clinging to its place above the entrance. Soon, that space would carry a different name. Ken Consulting. Where talent is seen, where innovation thrives, where the underestimated become unstoppable. Not bad for just a secretary.